All right. So let's get started. All right, branding students, you are in for a treat today. I am happy to announce our speaker this week, Graham Robertson, who is one of the identifies on LinkedIn as a top brand management voice. Uh, as well as he does many, many things, but I find his brilliant brand strategy as he shares in his content tops. His case studies. I use some of the material in our class. His books, I own two of them, branding to businesses and to consumers. I love his teardowns of companies and what goes on. So, Graham, thank you so much for speaking to us today, and take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. As mentioned, I'll go through a lot of different thoughts here from my experience, and don't know what other kind of people you do have talking to your class, but I am what is called a generalist these days. And so I am a brand manager at heart. And that is a job title that can be something you can build around as your career too. Now I've been the last 14 years doing my own thing with this beloved brands. And that's where I go around the world making marketers smarter. And the idea there is to produce a better work, smarter work, driving results. And so I get hired by a lot of different companies to come in and train the marketers. And I've been doing that for the 14 years, probably been in around 30 different countries at this point doing this kind of thing. And so it's my second career. My first career was brand management and marketing. Just to plot, everybody, hopefully you can see the screen. We are connected to brands in kind of weird ways. Think of some of these brands you might easily recognize. And so what, just to try to chart, if you can see some of these brands up on the screen that plop in, and kind of think about which ones you can get and which ones you can't. I like to show these images because none of these are the core product or have the logo connected to it. I mean, the only logo up here, well, I guess we've got the Ferrari logo and the keychain, and we've got the Coke logo on what is effectively a cap, but is in a sense garbage, right? And, we've got Apple with the white plug up there in the top right. It's interesting how many people have seen, sometimes in marketing, we think everything's connected to an ad. How many of you have seen a Ferrari ad? There are no Ferrari ads. The Formula One racing is basically where they put all their marketing money. Yeah, how many have seen a Starbucks ad? Not very many. They've done it here and there, but it's not really what's driven the brand. Obviously, we've got the French fries at McDonald's, such a classic, easily recognizable symbol that probably most of you could get. And then even the Air Jordan, and I picked an image that doesn't really show the logo, but why would red, white, and black shoes convey the Jordan brand when you can't see the logo or even the shoe? So just some kind of, these cues get stuck in our brains, and that's what connects us to that. And I like to, what I do for a living is try to explain brands, but I do want to leave room for this unexplainable magic that can happen. And that's why the execution comes into play so readily, because we have to execute and create some of these cues for our own customer. And the other object there, the silver object, is basically an Allen key. So an Allen key is so connected with the IKEA brand, and you'll probably be shopping at IKEA once you graduate and get a little bit of cash and want to move in on your own. So that becomes part of that brand. This is an ad from France for Coke. What's interesting to me is I generally will show this to an audience and about 35% love it, because it tells a story of harmony of a person of color hand and a white hand coming together, hopefully creating some kind of harmony, and the Coke brand in the middle. What's not here is obviously the product, the logo, any words to tell that story. And I always emphasize that probably somewhere between 30 to 35% of the audience love it. Probably equally, 30 to 35% of the people will not like it, whether they go as far as dislike it or feel they're being preached at or whichever. And I like that because, what's interesting is our work sometimes should be polarizing. And sometimes it's good that we have that risk of not everybody liking the work. But if we could ever achieve 35% of people loving it, that's likely a sign of something fantastic and great. So maybe one of the things that you can feel free to do is share any commentary in the chat, and we'll pick that up as we go through this presentation, and just fire any questions there as well, and we'll pick that up as we get to the end of this presentation. Share whether you love this, hate it, or just okay on it. And it's okay that not everybody loves a certain thing or even likes it. I just want to emphasize that that's important. One of the things I always talk about is the difference between a product and a brand. And if we think about it, the product is probably the base cake. The brand is what goes on top of that to bring it to life. And so, yes, a product solves a problem. To me, I always talk about a brand as beating down the customer's enemy. A product is a rational solution. A brand is emotional. A product might have a list of ingredients that go on the packaging. A brand, just as I talked about with the first slide, these assets, identifiable assets. A product is consumed. Once you're done that Coke, the Coke is done, right? It's over. But a brand is experienced, and there's kind of some history and connectivity to that. And maybe there's a story or an experience that you can talk to. A product is built into a routine, and a brand becomes a ritual. A product might have a design or a patent. A brand has a reputation. And that's, as brand managers, what we do is we try to manage that reputation. Along the bottom is of that continuum is the difference between a commodity, which is the product, and for me, the term I use is a beloved brand, where we start to have that emotional connectivity to it. It's interesting. We generally will think of brands connected to beer brands. And a beer brand, they've done actually some studies in blind taste tests. So if you have a favorite beer brand, what they found is that in blind taste tests, only about half of the people can actually recognize their beer based on the tastes. And what the same study did was, they gave you your favorite beer as the test, and only half of the people said, this is my favorite beer. And then they gave you the favorite beer again, and only half of those knew it was the same actual product. And so it's just interesting that without that label to identify that commodity, which is a beer product, it's tough to kind of identify all that connects to it. So if we think about how we view different brands within that marketplace, all of those assets add to it. One of my favorite quotes connected to marketing is this Oscar Wilde quote: "Never love anyone who treats you like you are ordinary." And we should always be thinking of our end customer and try to treat that person as though they are special. And I like to, as a marketer, I always stay fixated on what my consumer is thinking and how they will react. And if you look at it, do you do enough in your brand that could get your customers to line up in the rain just to get into your store? And maybe if you treat them this well on the way out, they'll want to come back in. And if we look at it, could you get 300,000 people to put $1,000 down for a car that does not yet exist? And that's what Tesla did back in 2015 when they asked people, do you want to buy a car that were yet to even design? Now, that's a lot of money that people were willing to put down, and 300,000 people generated a lot of money. Could you sell even more jackets by telling consumers not to buy your jacket? And this is a famous ad by Patagonia, don't buy this jacket. And the idea of the small print was the overconsumption of products. And they talked about how our jackets last longer and you don't need to keep rebuying it one every year. You can keep it for 10 years, you can wash it, you can send it in and we'll repair it. All that talk about overconsumption is actually bad for the environment. And that's what they were stressing. Can you get a 4-year-old child to sit still and use their imagination with just a couple of pieces of plastic? And that, to me, what Lego does with that imagination. Can you actually invent an image for Santa Claus that now everyone believes that person to be? And back in the 1930s, this is the image that Coca-Cola came up with, was Santa Claus. Prior to this, Santa was viewed as some kind of short, skinny Dutch guy. And now he's a jolly, robust, bearded, happy guy. And that's the image that we hold today as Santa Claus. Most of us would probably identify this as the image of Santa Claus. And you may not know it, but that was actually an image that came out from Coca-Cola brand. So one of the things I want to talk about, and as you're thinking of your career, your professor mentioned that, most of you are juniors and seniors, and you may be thinking about what you want to do in your career. And I can certainly answer any questions to that. Myself, I'm a generalist, but there are many specialist roles out there. I did mention, so my career was spent at these 3 companies, mainly Coca-Cola, General Mills, and Johnson & Johnson. My daughter, who's recently graduated a few years ago now, she's 26, and she's working in an ad agency environment. And even then, it'll be interesting to see, because I think we're at a real state of flux. Not that it's great that you're graduating in this state of flux, but you'll have to be more flexible in your career than probably I was. We joined these large companies and hope to stay with them. I couldn't predict, but in 10 years, will everybody become a contractor? Is the idea of an employee. I would suggest that you would be naive to think that you could start a job next year and stay with them till 2050. I don't think you should think like that. You should probably think of, though, your loyalty should be to yourself, and you should think and act like a contractor, even if you're very happy in your company, because things could change in an instant. You could get sold to different people. I have been the last 14 years working with companies around the world. I've been to about 30 different countries now, and these are some of the different brands that I've worked with post-career, this last 14 years, this second career. In your area, Hershey and, the NFL down in DC and NBA. Some of those are famous brands. The Mayo Clinic. I like to take pride because my grade 11 chemistry mark was not the highest mark in the class, not very good at all. But I worked at the Mayo Clinic. I would tease anybody who's went in the science route that as a marketer, I kind of came in the back door than that one. So these are some of the different brands that I've worked with over the years. I try to keep my thinking, and I know that you're going to, meet different experts here and there. but I try to keep my thinking very simple and practical. I tend to think of myself almost as simple as a convenience store manager, that kind of mentality. That mentality would lead me to use common sense in my job and always bringing that into it. Theory to me is fun on podcasts. It can stretch your brains, but I like to think about the reality. So if I'm that convenience store manager, well, if I know the Super Bowl's on this weekend, I'm going to put my, I'm going to over order on chips and, different things connected to a party, and I'll put that front and center. If I know that it's a long weekend in the spring and the weather's going to be great, I'll put all my, sun tanning or, beach paraphernalia that I might have, put that front and center. That's the mentality, the simplistic thinking that you want to do. You don't want to be overly theoretical in this business. You also want to think like your customer, and I tend to, even in my strategy words, try to use very small, simple words, because I find when we reach for those big intellectual words, that's our first sign we're losing touch with reality. I mentioned a marketing specialist or a generalist, and these are sort of two different career paths you can take. On the specialist side, you can be a specialist in things like a different media choice. So you can be a social media marketing specialist. You could be a product specialist, some type of research. Any of those things could be a specialist. In a generalist kind of way, you're a brand manager, a marketing manager, a business manager. In a specialist, your expertise comes in one specific area. You express the strategy through creativity. The generalist runs a branded business. There is a profit and loss connected to it. We develop the strategy on this side. The specialist takes that strategy and executes based on their expertise. The generalist might determine the budget. A specialist works within the budget. So you're given $500,000 to make this work, your area. And the specialist might be the recommender of ideas. The generalist is the decision maker. A specialist knows a lot about their expertise. A generalist knows a little bit, not a lot about anything, but a little bit about everything. And that's kind of that generalist kind of view. An generalist aligns every expert. So you might have, if you're running a brand, you might have 20 to 30 different experts now running that business. And you're running from meeting to meeting, but you've got to have that big picture. And the specialist understands how they fit into that and delivers their part. So if we think about this, almost like the generalist is a football coach and a specialist is a football player. And so as we look at that specialist, a specialist wants to have a market impact that moves that customer along their journey. And the generalist looks at the output of that, the share, the sales, and the profit. That's sort of how we can look at those two types of careers. And there's no right answer. And there's no right answer today as to say which one's safer or which one makes more money, because you can make a lot of just as much money as a specialist as you can as a generalist. So you pick the one that you think fits your personality or your passion area. To me, I'll speak a little bit about the generalist, and you can see how it fits in, but my expertise is that generalist. The best marketers are actually rare. They love the analytics and the math, the logic, the strategy, the intuition and the instincts, the creativity and the passion, structure and planning. They offer commitment and hard work, yet they always have to leave a little room for magic in the work they know their consumers will love and connect with. It's the magic that drives that power, growth, and profit. So that's sort of the balance of the analytics and the smart with the creativity and that magic side of things. And our training that we do focuses on these 5 areas: analytics, strategy, positioning, planning, and execution. So that's kind of a logical way to get there. But I mentioned that the marketer is a generalist. And what we look at is what it takes to run a brand. We have all of these elements, and there are generally experts in each of these areas. So as a marketer, I would interact with all the people running these different ones, right? The brand story could be my ad agencies that I'm working with. Product innovation could be people in a lab with PhDs and, they're trying to figure out the next great product. Purchase moment could be my salespeople that I interact with. The consumer experience. The culture could be my HR people. Operations could be people running the plant. And I always held this belief, and it's kind of, if you are going to pursue a generalist kind of view, I mentioned we know a little bit about everything, but nothing about a lot. I always held the view that whenever I walked into a room, I was the least knowledgeable person in the room. And to me, that was an advantage because I could ask those common sense, logical questions. And that was what I viewed as that generalist. You're not a know-it-all, you're the opposite. You're kind of a sponge to listen to it all, but you don't want to ever become an expert. And you should never convey your expertise. Within that kind of framework, these are actually the different tools that I would have in my toolkit, and I can do all this type of information, and all this work goes into me getting from that unknown part of a brand all the way to the execution. One of the things I stress, and this is sort of, we deal with a lot of different experts, but one of the experts, we kind of sit in the middle between these two. We got some advertising people that are going to execute, but I have to deliver the numbers to these finance people. Truth be told, the marketer needs the finance people to give us the budget, but we have to deliver the results back to that finance person. So I always say that advertising people see art, finance people see numbers. This is kind of a different concept to think about, but the best marketers see art and numbers at the same time. When I look at that ad, I can actually start to, my brain almost starts to go on overload, and I can actually start to almost think like I can hear a cash register going off, or I can see the numbers clicking, and I can go, okay, so this ad will really attract a lot of attention and provide my brand out there, and that will get customers to go to the shelf and buy the brand, and I'll have a higher share. And from a higher share, I can charge higher prices and get better margin and better profit. And I can start to trigger all that kind of thinking. So to me, if you can do that, that's going to make you the best kind of marketer. One of the things that I was running the marketing department at Johnson & Johnson, and I sat there and I was kind of like, well, what am I going to actually do? And I kind of came up with this love curve was one of the things I came up with early on in the job, because I noticed that different brands had this kind of reaction in the marketplace, or even within my own people, or even with the retailers that I was selling to, that if you were a more beloved brand, if you had more status within that category, a Vino or Tylenol, for me, were brands that had more cachet out there. They were in that love it or beloved stage. But the unknown brands or the indifferent brands, maybe they were just starting out, but they didn't have that kind of cachet. They were up there, and we really had to kickstart them and get them going. An indifferent brand to me is more of, it acts like a commodity. And each of these type of roles, they have either good things or bad things, but I could start to see that there was some separation in terms of strategy. The unknown brands, I had to get noticed. The indifferent brands, I had to get into the customer's brain and separate myself from other ones. To be a trusted brand at that like it stage, I needed to have multiple experiences with that customer to deliver that consistency. On the love it side, I needed to tighten the bond with our most loyal brand lovers. And then as I became a beloved brand, I wanted to get my customers who love me to actually get talking about me so they can influence their friends. And that's where this love curve came into play. What I can also start to see is there are different activities. So now I can get down to the tactics, right? And these, I've got 4 tactics for each of these 5 areas. So I've got a strategy and a tactical area. And if you look down at the bottom, this is kind of the mentality I want to get to. If I'm at the unknown stage, I want to attract consumers to me. If I'm at the indifferent stage, I want to inform them of my point of difference. At the like it stage, I want to close the sale multiple times. At the love it stage, I want to service them. And at the beloved stage, I want to delight the consumers. And so you'll see, if you're a fan of Starbucks, Starbucks does a lot of that beloved delight, you know, with their pumpkin spice latte and a lot of different options that they do. And even the service model is to delight those consumers. They put your name on the cup. They hopefully recognize you if you keep coming back to the same location, and they engage in a conversation. All of that is about delighting the consumer and making them feel good. Now, Starbucks has kind of had a bit of a wiggle the last couple of years, and a wiggle in a bad way. But that is where they need to get back to that. They became almost too efficient, and they're just pumping out coffee, and that gets you back into the indifferent or commodity-like brand. They need to get back to that great experience that they had, and we'll see if they can do that. One of the things, a model that I play around with is this consumer journey. As a consumer, we all go through brands. We become aware, we consider, we search, we buy, we're satisfied, repeat, loyal, and become a fan. Our brand love curve matches up to that. And even more so, I can begin to match up that attract, inform, close, service, and delight, and begin to actually have other objectives in there, standing out to be seen within the cluster of brands, solving questions or doubt. Now, search gets higher with a risky brand, and a risky brand is something that could be high in importance to you or high in expense. So a car has a big risk to you. So if you go out there and want to buy a car, now you're spending $25,000, $50,000, whatever thousand you're going to spend, and that is a high risk. You probably want to engage in a lot of search, and so it might take you 4 to 6 months to decide on a car, because you're going to go through and look at YouTube pages and reviews and consumers report, all this type of information, compare models, go through what's the size of the engine, what's the seats like, go do a test drive. All of that is in that search stage. The latest bubble gum and it's hot cinnamon, you'll be like 10 seconds, try it, gone. There's no search to it. It's only a minimal cost, and it's a minimal risk to you. If you hate it, you hate it. So that's where search comes in. And as we move to the left-hand side of this, one of the things that prior to around 2000, we generally would see the marketing focus on the right-hand side of this chart. But as we now move into that overall process, we can now do a lot of work over on the left-hand side of this. So we would, if you go back into the advertising of the 1970s, it was just all about attract, close the deal, attract, close the deal. Now, what we start to see is there's a lot of great work on the left-hand side of this, whether that's, Sephora with their makeup tips and Starbucks with their different drinks, user-generated content. And I'll show one of the examples later on, but user-generated content is some neat stuff to play around with. So what we want to do is, once we do all that strategy work, and I'm not going to talk a lot about that because I've got all these sessions, but this session, we're going to actually start to talk about judging some work and how it fits in. As a marketer, what I look at, one time I had an ad agency person ask me, so what do you think the ad should look like? I started to describe it, and then I actually said, I have no idea. And I like to think about that no idea. If I'm going to engage that creative person, I want to have no idea. I want it to actually be the perfect gift that I never thought to get myself. And that's actually my mentality. I'm going to tell you who I am. You go out there and buy me the perfect gift. And I have now been married 32 years. One of my best gifts ever, because when if you've been married that long, you run out of gift ideas. One of the best gifts I had was my wife bought me these hamburger buns from a place we used to live that I always claimed were the best hamburger buns, and would say, once a year, I miss those hamburger buns. I know it sounds pretty small. It is pretty small. But she actually, for my birthday, bought me these hamburger buns. Now, what, $5 for the buns, but she spent an hour going out and an hour coming back, and just to think about it, it was the perfect gift. Now, that's the kind of mentality I like to have as the marketer. I want to leave the creativity up to those experts, but I will tell them, all I can tell you is this is here's the gift box over on the left-hand side. I want work that focuses on my target, fits my brand, delivers my message, and executes my strategy. And that becomes the actual framing of my box. So I look at this almost as a marketing gift box. If you can get ideas into that box, that's going to be, to me, the perfect gift. So these 4 criteria is how I'll start to judge the work. And as I start off the process, I actually use a creative brief to kind of describe what I think the box is. Now, none of this brief has anything in the execution of things. So I don't tell them what the work should be, but I tell them what the strategy is, what the target is, what my message is, and a little bit about my brand with brand idea and brand assets. And that becomes the brief that I might have. And then when work comes back, I've got to decide, does it fit in my box? Does it meet those criteria? And here we've got 3 ideas come back. I have 1 that's way out, 2 that are on the edge of that. Now I would use my feedback to get them into that box. So my feedback that I would give that agency would be to steer them into that box, and not to tell them exactly what to do, but to give them that feedback. And I might kill the 3rd idea in this case. And in that way, we can actually start to see what is the best work. I want to back up a little bit about talking about advertising and what makes it great. And so if we want to simplify all this stuff, we're going to get work that is smart and different. So it's got to be smart enough to deliver my strategy, the positioning work. It's got to be different enough to stand out and stick in that consumer's mind. So if I look at it, obviously, the work that I would really reject is things that are not smart and not different. That's boring work that is kind of stupid and not connected to the brand. Obviously, get rid of that. Smart but not different is going to be on strategy, but kind of dull and boring. What we can see here is different but not smart. That's creative for the sake of it, but it might not fit my brand. So you go, wow, it's a great ad, but it could be for anything. And what I want to get to is finding that space that is different and smart. And that sounds obvious, but how do we actually get there? And if I go to most research companies, they would have something similar to this. They might call it different things, but we need to be high on branded breakthrough. So I need to get attention, and I need to get motivate my consumers. Once that message gets to them, I need to actually figure out how to actually move them. So I need messaging that moves them. And so if I look at it on the branded breakthrough, how we capture consumers and the motivating consumers is what we say. And so in that case, on the branded breakthrough, I want attention and brand link. So as we get that attention, I want my brand to be connected to that attention. As we move consumers, I want to communicate a message that is going to move them in some way, either emotionally or physically or rationally, whichever is the case. But I also need to stick in their brain. And I need to stick in their brain because I mentioned buying a car could take 4 to 6 months. You know, too much marketing is so transactional. We think it's going to be a 5-second, hey, buy this. It's not. It could be that I could need to deliver this message to you 15 times, 15 different ways in the next 6 months for you to go, finally, that's the car for me. So I need to get the message to stick in your brain. And even a piece of bubble gum, I might advertise it during a football game, and you might buy it 3 days later. Oh, I like that product. Something about that was made me buy it. There it is on the shelf. And so I need to have it stick in your brain long enough. And that is part of that stickiness. So what you're going to notice, ABCS, the ABCs, keep it simple: attention, brand link, communication, and stickiness. So now I can actually start to actually think about and have almost a checklist mentality. Does it break through the clutter? Attention. Does it link closely to my brand name? Brand link. Does it communicate the main message I want to do? Does it trigger a desired response? The stickiness. And that is kind of the ABCs. Keep it simple, right? Don't make this overly complicated. Bill Bernbach, who did a lot of the work back in the 50s and 60s, he was the one who did Think Small for Volkswagen in a lot of provocative ways. Find something interesting to say and say it in an interesting way. That, to me, all that quote delivers the attention, brand link, communication, and stickiness. So, interesting way, attract attention, have my brand be part of that, find something interesting to say. That's the motivating message that is the communication and the stickiness. So that is my simplistic attention, brand link, communication, and stickiness. So try that out with your next ad that you might see and want to talk about. It's a great little tool, and that becomes actually my checklist. So does it fit in the box? I use this little checklist. I score high, medium, and low. I do this on my own, and I kind of allow me. I've got the attention, brand link, communication, and stickiness as part of that. I've got gut instincts, strategy, bond, other things that could be some thinking. The worst thing to do is you see an ad and you go, I love it. And then you're on your way home and you go, it didn't even have my brand part of it, or it wasn't delivering my message. And so to me, we can kind of get lost sometimes in that work. So let's try it out. Okay, let's see. You guys take a look at some of these ads, see if they do attention, brand link, communication, stickiness. It's a bank in the UK, a new bank, obviously modern. So that's one of those banks that's a modern bank. Probably you guys are the target for this. So here's another ad. So look at this ad. This is for Apple. Think of all the ways you could have communicated this, but look how much work they put into attracting your attention. So the music choice, the animal choice, the visuals, the actual talent they hired, the guy, a little bit off beat as well. So take a look at all those things that are attracting your attention and then see if they communicate a message. So probably they could have hired different talent, right? So the actor itself, a bit different, but it does all attract your attention. The amount of music up front, the visual, and how they held your attention without giving away the ad itself, and trying to tell a bit of a story there. Very simplistic. You can delete your messages. If they just did that, it would be kind of boring. I mentioned user-generated content. This is an area far to the left, right? We can now, what McDonald's did, don't know if you saw this on TikTok, it would have been on the spring of 2023, the Grimace Shake. What they did was they gave a lot of assets, branded assets, out to different creators on TikTok and got them to generate. And basically the brief was go generate some fun. And it started off a lot of these ads, very high risk to the brand, because by drinking this product, you'll start to see some of these, the actual consumer dies. But
You guys are reacting. Nothing bad is happening yet. Oh, that's actually cute.
Oh my God. You okay? Hey, you okay? I feel weird. Haley. 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 Haley, I'm getting kind of freaked out, all right? This isn't funny anymore. Haley.
So there's 4 different ads. I think I could have grabbed about 50 of them online. Now, they also had other ones that weren't generated by the actual creators. So it did take off. Other people started to generate their own ones. But, lawyers getting involved. Lawyers are part of marketing as well. You got to get your work approved by the lawyers, and that's not always easy. So this is a high risk thing that McDonald's took a real shot at. And it's just pretty interesting stuff. And obviously, I think they got like millions of views. Like, it's a crazy amount that each one got, like maybe 20 or 30 million views. Maybe you guys saw some of that work. This is a Nike spot. Nike is in the news. They just fired their CEO, but this is a spot probably pre-CEO. To me, I do consulting, but I don't like to think of myself as a consultant, but they actually hired a consultant as their CEO. Not a good idea to me. But this is a spot from a few years ago. Great
If
coffee.
you show emotion, we're called dramatic. If we want to play against men, we're nuts. And if we dream of equal opportunity, delusional. When we stand for something, we're unhinged.
Super, he's gonna need to calm down.
When we're too good, there's something wrong with us. And if we get angry, we're hysterical or rational or just being crazy. But a woman running a marathon was crazy.
Officials tried to pull her off the course.
A woman boxing was crazy. A woman dunking, crazy. Coaching an NBA team, crazy. A woman competing in a hijab, changing her sport, landing a double cork 1080, or winning 23 Grand Slams, having a baby, and then coming back for more. Crazy, 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 and crazy. So if they want to call you crazy, fine. Show them what crazy can do.
So if you want to be a copywriter, that is some of the best copy out there. As a marketer, as that generalist, I have to realize that the greatness of my brand that I'm managing comes from the greatness of the experts we engage. So all those people surrounding me, I have to motivate and inspire them to deliver their best work on my brand. And that's what being a brand manager is. That's the book that we mentioned earlier. And that is my presentation. I said 45 minutes and we came in at 47.
It was awesome. That was awesome. Thank you so much. Really, I loved it. I love that presentation. So here is your opportunity to ask an expert in marketing, in all facets and areas of marketing, someone who's done it, someone who's teaching it. A fantastic session we just went through. So here's your chance to either take yourself off mute and ask a question out loud, or throw it in the chat and I'll ask it for you. So who wants to be first? I mean, this is your opportunity to ask. I guess I can get us started, Graham. When they graduate, let's say this spring, what's your advice for them to get started in their career?
Well, it's different today, but what I recommend to people is I would figure out, the first question is, do you want to be a generalist or a specialist? And then what I would do is once I decide that, if I become a specialist, social media specialist, whichever, or a brand manager was my goal. I would now connect with people on LinkedIn at the 20 companies that I would potentially like to work for. And maybe, whether I just connect with them or if I can get any advice for how to get a job at that company, that would be ideal. What a lot of companies have, so this is part of the reason why it's a bit of a secret, is a lot of companies will pay money for a recommendation. So if you're at that company, you'll get $1,000 if we hire your recommended person. So if I can get in there and get some of these people to engage with them and know them, then they may get to the point where they feel that they could actually recommend me and get their $1,000. And that's what I would do. And probably that, even if they don't recommend me seeing what they do and how they think and what they might project, I can start to see what the career's like. And that gives me conversation to talk about as well. Secondly, I would recommend anyone who is getting into this field to start their own side hustle. And that side hustle will teach you so much more, as well as give you a conversation about what it's like to run that side hustle. And that can be a talking point in your job interviews as well. So start your side hustle now, and you'll have 9 months of experience to talk about. And that way you can say, well, I started this, I'm selling whatever you're selling, and that way you can communicate what it's like You're actually running a business, you're doing things, you're getting more attention out there, you're trying to figure out your customer. All that work that I just mentioned gives you a chance to actually talk about it. Because one of the things, a lot of people my age will talk about how it's ageist and that we don't hire old people. I'm going to tell you one other thing. It's tough on the other side too. So marketing is filled with a bunch of 30 somethings who hate 20 somethings and plus 40 somethings. So that's the reality. It takes a while to get in to the job, and and then you get kicked out. So that's what, that's the two ageisms. We don't talk about the ageism on the young side, but there is that ageism. And you may have to struggle for the first few years and realize that it might not go as smoothly or as perfectly as you want it to. But that's what, I tell people the work you put in your 20s will pay off in your 30s. That's when you really start to make more money. You get more, of the respect. It's kind of funny when I was going through marketing, feels like when I turned 30, I all of a sudden got respect, and it kind of sucked because I realized that I didn't have respect for the previous 8 years. That's the reality.
All right, I have a student. That was excellent. Thank you. Student says, how will you keep your messaging consistent to help make it sticky? Any suggestions on that?
Well, it's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can have consistency in messaging and creativity. So one of the things that people will talk about how Nike is one of the best at this. But Nike uses a lot of variation in how they get their messaging out there. And I think that keeps it actually fresh. Now, that box that we mentioned, you've got to know that as the decision maker, you've got to understand what that box is. And maybe you got to widen the box a little bit to get it to fit everything. But is there, you've got to be the guardian of consistency. And that's one of the things that I think is crucial, that you understand your brand. But Nike has many ways that they deliver just do it and that kind of messaging. And they probably are one of the best out there. And that's what I would really stress. Don't get too rigid as well, right? Don't get too rigid where everything is repetitive, because your consumer can get, it will come across as a little bit stiff.
All right, I have a question. Any tips on how to, as a young marketer, to get some respect earlier in your career? I'm thinking, I mean, definitely doing what you say you're supposed to do, getting your work, over promise and under deliver. What was, Graham, what suggestions would you give to the young marketers to get some of this respect earlier than later?
Yeah, there's a few flaws that we can naturally have that you got to get rid of. So, in university, you have deadlines and you can ask for an extension. In work, if you ask for your second extension, it's almost like you're done, right? So one of the things that is so important is a missed deadline in the real world becomes a missed opportunity. So you've got to make sure that you deliver what is being asked of you on time with a high quality of work. And that is going to earn you some respect as somebody they can rely on. And that's really important to that. I also think that one of the ways, even before you get into the job, that you can earn some respect is being someone who has proven to have done it. And that's why I emphasize do a side hustle. That would be something that's really important to me.
I have a student that's interested on the media side and getting a job there. What advice would you suggest for that?
So in that case, again, just similar, what you've got to do, so the generalist role is an expert of nothing, knowledgeable, but a little bit about everything. What a specialist has to do is become an expert in that one thing. So you can become an expert in TikTok. You can become an expert in Facebook marketing. You can get to that point, or you can be even a little less expert in the actual media and become an expert in social media, digital media. Those type of things can be something that you can work with. Thinking like a contractor. You know, I would encourage everyone, even on the generalist side, to think like you're a contractor. And always be aware of where your company is going. When I was getting into marketing, I kind of wanted to think about, hey, I'm here for 5 to 10 years. I like this idea. And you know, and then your boss quits, your company gets bought, you know, everybody changes around you, and all of a sudden you're like, I hate it here. So the mentality of, I would stress, always act like a free agent. One of the examples I highlighted as my consulting, I worked with the NFL, and I met a lot of NFL players. Just so you're aware, if you're a fan of the NFL players, we started to brainstorm some ideas with them, and they are not loyal to their team at all. They are all think of themselves as independent contractors. So while they may say in the press, hey, I like being a Philadelphia Eagle and love the coach and want to stay here, they would move in a heartbeat. What they are loyal to is their actual college team, which was interesting. So even 20 years later, they're loyal to Ohio State or Alabama or wherever they went, but not to their pro team. And they act like a contractor. I would say that it's probably going to be healthier for you to act like a constant contractor. Just when you're at work, smile and say, I love being here and I want to be here and it's a great company and I'm really loyal. But when you go home, have that same mentality like the football player, and that you keep in the back of your mind that you would go somewhere else.
That was fantastic. That we've been on this for an hour now. That's a fantastic program, Graham. I want to do what is a traditionally something I would do if I would be putting my thumb up as well. It's a 2 thumbs up photo at the end for my students, and then we're going to say thank you as we click on out of here. Thank you again for this presentation, this session. It was outstanding, as I knew it would be. As a big fan of your stuff, highly recommend. If you want to get more of Graham's teaching, buy his books, Beloved Brands, his training. It's outstanding, highly recommended. As you could see, this session we just got from Graham. What a great.
Feel free to add me on LinkedIn too. And all those people you need to connect with, you can probably steal some of them as people will comment and connect with me as well. Look at whoever. I have like 45,000 followers at this point. So probably somebody's going to fit your career choice in those kind of spaces.
Or a company that you want to work for. There's probably somebody following Graham that's there.
Yeah.
All right. So on the count of 3, let's get 2 thumbs up and thank you. And Graham, appreciate this again. 1, 2, thumbs up. Thank you. Go. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, everybody. See you later. Have a great weekend. And Graham, again, thank you so much for that session.
All right. Have a great week, guys.
Take care.